We believe in the strength of our democracies. We believe in the strength of American democracy.
That was French President Emmanuel Macron, one of many world leaders to comment on yesterday's attack on the Capitol. Images of protesters storming the building were featured on the front page of nearly every major international newspaper. Words like shock and appalling were the headlines of choice. Now the world watches to see how Congress and the president respond to the unprecedented assault. CBS News foreign correspondent Holly Williams joins us now from London. Hi, Holly. After a day that shook most Americans to the core, what else are we hearing from world leaders who watched these shocking events unfold from afar?
Well, Tanya, America's friends and allies around the world have made it very clear that they are horrified by what they saw happen in Washington yesterday. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson described the scenes as disgraceful. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said she was sad and angry. The Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison sounded genuinely emotional upset when he said that it was very distressing to watch what had happened in the US. And the Swedish Prime Minister said that President Trump bears significant responsibility for an assault on democracy. And we had a similar comment from the Norwegian Prime Minister. So to be clear, some American allies are calling out the leader of the free world, more or less directly, for this assault on democracy. And that, I think, is unheard of. But it's not just America's allies that watched what happened yesterday. It's America's rivals and its enemies as well. And they are already using it to justify their own authoritarian-style rule. So China's state-controlled media, for instance, has at times seemed to revel in the pictures of chaos that emerged from Washington. And Iran's President Hassan Rouhani said this shows what a failure Western democracy is.
And Holly, some are comparing the scenes in Washington yesterday to the coups and civil wars we see often happening overseas. Holly, you have, of course, covered these wars. Are there similarities?
Not much, I think. Look, it was dangerous and destabilizing and clearly very unsettling what happened yesterday in Washington. And I don't want to downplay any of that at all. But the military has not seized control of the government, which is oftentimes what you see in a coup. Gunmen have not seized control of the broadcast media, which is oftentimes what you see. And although some of the violence was deadly, it wasn't on the scale that we've seen in countries that have spiraled into civil war.
And Holly, from what you're hearing from world leaders, what do you think President-elect Joe Biden needs to do to restore the U.S.'s standing in the world?
Well, that's a very big question and probably not for me to answer, but I guess I would make 2 points. Firstly, despite what has happened, the US is still far and away the most powerful country in the world, although, of course, it faces challenges, perhaps chief amongst them China. And secondly, this is just the latest in a string of things that have occurred during President Trump's time in office that have damaged American prestige. Included amongst them his dealings with the North Korean regime, his very transactional relationship with the Saudi Arabian regime that saw him more or less overlook the murder of a Saudi Arabian journalist inside a Saudi Arabian consulate, the betrayal of US allies in the Middle East, including allies that fought side by side in the battle against ISIS, and the handling or mishandling of the pandemic in the US. So I think it's safe to say that many people in the rest of the world view the United States quite differently than they did 4 or 5 years ago.
All right. Well, Holly Williams in London, thank you.